The blank book, a signal from the Noosphere. The rain wasn't just falling, it was etching the city, carving runes into the grime-caked asphalt and turning the neon signs of downtown into bleeding watercolors. Elara Vance watched it from the window of her third-floor walk-up, a space that smelled of old books and damp wool. The city, always a cacophony of sirens and distant shouts, was muted tonight, swaddled in a blanket of steady, percussive drizzle. It was on nights like these that the feeling crept in, not of fear, but a profound, unsettling certainty that the world she saw was a veil, and behind it, something immense and intelligent was breathing. Elara was a seeker, though her business card, if she had one, would read freelance archivist. She organized the forgotten papers of the deceased and the disorganized. It was a profession that lived in the interstitial spaces of life, among the ghosts of other people's memories. And it had honed her sensitivity to the patterns others missed, the recurring numbers on a clock face, the same strange word popping up in unrelated documents, the uncanny timing of a phone call from a long-lost friend just as she was thinking of them. Synchronicity. Carl Jung's term for it felt too clinical for the electric thrill it sent down her spine. It felt more like being nudged. Tonight, the nudge was a book. It had arrived in a crate of effects from the estate of Professor Alistair Finch, a reclusive philosopher of mind who had died in his rambling Victorian house on the edge of the city. Most of the crate was predictable, dense academic texts, lecture notes speckled with coffee stains. But this book was different. It was bound in a peculiar, supple leather the color of a day-old bruise, and it was utterly blank. No title, no author, no text on any of its thick, creamy pages. Yet, it had weight, a palpable density that felt more significant than its physical mass. As she ran her fingers over the cover, a faint, electric tingle, like static from an old radio, passed into her skin. The rain intensified, tapping a more urgent code against the glass. Elara placed the blank book on her desk, the single pool of light from her green-shaded lamp isolating it in the gloom. She felt a pull, a magnetic attraction to its emptiness. It was a silence that demanded to be filled. As she stared, a flicker at the edge of her vision, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper shadows of the hallway. Her heart hammered once, a dull thud against her ribs, but when she turned her head, there was nothing. Just the familiar topography of her apartment, made strange by the night. It was her subconscious, she told herself, projecting her unease onto the environment. The mind was a master of such tricks. Sleep, when it finally came, was not a respite. She dreamed of a labyrinthine library where the shelves stretched into an impossible darkness. The books on them were not written in ink, but in light, their pages humming with a low, resonant frequency. A figure moved between the stacks, always just out of sight, its passage marked by the soft whisper of turning pages. She heard a voice, not with her ears, but felt within the marrow of her bones, the source is not out there. The map is not the territory. She woke with a start, the words echoing in the silent apartment. The rain had stopped. The city was holding its breath. The next day was a palette of grays. The blank book, now a constant presence in her mind, felt like a key for which she had no lock. Driven by an impulse she didn't understand, she found herself walking towards the old part of the city, towards Professor Finch's house. The synchronicity was too strong to ignore. The book had come from there, and the dream library felt connected to the old academic's life's work. The air was cold and clean, washed by the night's rain. Finch's house was a Gothic silhouette against the leaden sky, a grand dame decaying gracefully behind an overgrown garden of thorny bushes and skeletal trees. The real estate agent, a nervous man with a too-tight suit, met her at the gate. "Not much interest," he confessed, jangling his keys. "People say it's odd." The inside was a museum of silence. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light cutting through shuttered windows. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, pipe tobacco, and something else, ozone, like after a lightning strike. While the agent prattled on about original moldings, Elara felt the pull again, stronger here. It led her up a creaking staircase to a study at the end of a long, dark hallway. This was the heart of the house. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves groaned under the weight of centuries of thought. A massive oak desk dominated the room, its surface a chaotic landscape of papers, strange crystalline rocks, and a large, intricate aura depicting the solar system. But her eyes were drawn to a single, clean space on the desk. A rectangular patch of dust-free wood, exactly the size and shape of the blank book now sitting on her own desk. Her fingers traced the empty space. "This is where you lived," as she did, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The room seemed to tilt, the shadows in the corners deepening, swirling. For a fleeting, terrifying second, she saw a man, tall, gaunt, with wild white hair and intense, kind eyes, standing at the window, looking out. Professor Finch. The image was gone as quickly as it came, but the impression remained, seared onto her retinas. It wasn't a memory, it was an echo. "He spent most of his time in here," the agent said from the doorway, making her jump. "Neighbors said he'd have conversations with himself. Or, he lowered his voice, with whoever wasn't there." That evening, Elara began her real work. She dove into Finch's papers, ignoring the mundane lecture notes and focusing on the margins, the personal journals, the fragments of thoughts scribbled on scraps. His writing was a map of a mind obsessed with the frontiers of consciousness. He wrote of the Noosphere, a realm of pure thought, a psychic ecosystem that humanity both contributed to and drew from. He theorized that synchronicities were not random accidents, but turbulence in the Noosphere, ripples caused by a significant thought or event, visible to those who were attuned. "The greatest prison," she read in a journal entry dated just weeks before his death, "is the belief that the self is confined to the skull. We are not isolated observers. We are focal points, lenses through which the universe becomes aware of itself. The subconscious is not a basement for our repressed desires, it is the root system connecting us to the whole. To touch it is to touch the source." The word "source" resonated with the voice from her dream. Her heart was pounding. This wasn't just academic curiosity, it was a confession, a testament. Finch hadn't died a reclusive crackpot. He had died on the verge of a revelation. Days bled into nights. The blank book remained on her desk, a silent companion. She started experiencing more intense phenomena. Whispers in the rustle of leaves outside her window, forming her name. Vivid, Waking dreams where the cityscape would momentarily flicker and be replaced by vast, geometric landscapes of light. She saw a man in a dark coat on the street below, always standing in the rain, his face obscured, watching her building. Was he a teacher, a warning, or a figment of her growing paranoia? Her subconscious was no longer a quiet tenant, it was remodeling the house. The climax came on a night of a howling storm, worse than the one when the book had arrived. The wind screamed around the corners of her building, and the windows rattled in their frames. Elara was trying to decipher a particularly cryptic passage in Finch's journal about projected thought forms, when the lights flickered and died, plunging the apartment into darkness save for the frantic strobe of lightning. In the sudden silence broken only by the storm, she heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was coming from the desk. Trembling, she lit a candle. The flame wavered, casting long, dancing shadows. She approached the desk. The blank book was open. And on its first page, words were appearing. Not written in ink, but emerging from the very fiber of the paper, as if being etched by an invisible stylus. They were forming in sync with the scratching sound. The wall is thin tonight, asterisk the words wrote themselves. Asterisk you are listening. Finally, you are listening, asterisk. Elara's breath caught in her throat. This was it. The mysterious event, the teacher, the threshold. This was the conversation Finch had been having. He hadn't been talking to himself. He had been talking to this. Who are you? She whispered, her voice swallowed by the storm. The scratching paused. New words formed, elegant and precise. Asterisk I am the part of you that knows. I am the interface. You called me with your seeking. Finch called me with his questions. We are all calling, all the time. Most just never learn to hear the answer, asterisk. It was her own subconscious. Or something infinitely vaster that her subconscious was plugged into. The source. The shadowy figure she'd seen on the street, the man in her dream, they were all manifestations, thought forms her mind had created to give a face to the faceless. What do you want? She asked, the philosophical question feeling terrifyingly immediate. To be used, asterisk the book responded. Asterisk the Noosphere is a muscle. It atrophies with disbelief. It strengthens with focused intention. Thought is not a passive reflection. It is an active force. It writes the world, asterisk. The storm reached a fever pitch. A tremendous crack of thunder shook the building. In the blinding flash of lightning that followed, Elara saw the shadow in the hallway again, but this time it didn't retreat. It flowed into the room, a patch of absolute darkness that absorbed the candlelight. It had no features, but she felt its attention, a pressure on her mind. This was her deepest fear made manifest, the formless terror of the unknown, the monster under the bed of reality. It is yours to command, asterisk the words glowed on the page. Asterisk it is made from you. It has only the power you give it, asterisk. Panic threatened to consume her. The shadow oozed closer, bringing with it a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the chill of existential dread. She could feel its whispers promising oblivion, reinforcing every insecurity, every failure. This was the final test. Not to fight it, but to understand it. Drawing on a well of strength she didn't know she possessed, a strength born from nights of reading Finch's words and days of observing the patterns, she stopped recoiling. She stood her ground. She looked into the heart of the shadow and, instead of seeing a monster, she saw her own reflection. It was her fear of meaninglessness, her anxiety about being alone in a cold universe. "You are me," she said, her voice steady now, cutting through the storm's roar. "And I am not afraid." She didn't command it to leave. She accepted it. She understood it. And in that moment of profound acceptance, the shadow dissolved. It didn't vanish, it flowed back into her, reintegrating. The cold was replaced by a warm, humming energy. The storm outside began to abate, its fury spent. She looked back at the book. The page was blank again. But the feeling remained, a connection, a circuit that had been completed. Elara spent the rest of the night in quiet awe, watching the city emerge clean and new from the storm. The revelation was not some dark conspiracy, but a luminous, terrifyingly beautiful truth. Reality was participatory. Consciousness was not a ghost in the machine, it was the fundamental substance. Synchronicities were the winks and nods from a universe that was far more alive, far more intelligent, and far more intimate than she had ever dared believe. She picked up a pen. She held it over the first page of the blank book. She thought of a single word, light. And there, in the calm of the dawn, the word began to gently glow, as if written in phosphorescent ink. It was a small thing, a simple word. But it was a creation. It was a beginning. The seeker had found not an answer, but a dialogue. And the universe, it turned out, was listening. The story was not over, it was just now being written, one conscious, courageous thought at a time. The sense of wonder was a physical warmth in her chest, an inspiration that whispered of infinite possibilities, hidden in the quiet spaces between the rain. Did you feel it? That shift in the air, the subtle sense that the world might be softer, more porous than it seems? That the patterns are not just coincidence, but a conversation? If Elara's journey resonated with you, if her awakening to the whispers of the Noosphere left you looking at the shadows in your own room with a sense of wonder rather than fear, then you are not alone. This story was a signal, sent out into the ether. And by hearing it, you have become a part of its pattern. The investigation into the hidden nature of reality continues. There are more mysteries to uncover, more thresholds to cross, and more seekers like Elara waiting for their moment of awakening. Your engagement is the key that unlocks the next chapter. By subscribing, you ensure the signal remains strong. You'll be the first to know when a new case file is opened, when a new synchronicity demands to be explored. But this is more than a broadcast, it's a dialogue. Your thoughts, your theories, the strange coincidences you've experienced, the comments section is a modern-day version of Elara's journal, a place where we can map the synchronicities together. Every like is a nod of recognition, a ripple in the collective noosphere that says, I hear it, too. So, don't let the mystery end here. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like if this story changed the texture of your reality, even for a moment. And in the comments, tell us, What was the last synchronicity you experienced? What hidden power of the mind do you wish we would investigate next? The universe is listening. Let's see what it hears.